I read 5 books last week, and you only read a couple chapters? There seems to be a false expectation or notion within the world that I've come across, and maybe I've seen it myself too. I don't know if you all have seen it, but I've noticed it. That to be a reader, you have to read a lot. Like, say, a book a day, a book a week, 5 books a week. Who's to say? But I don't think there's any rule that says to be a reader, you can't read just maybe chapter a day, a couple chapters a week, a book a month. What does it matter? So, to encourage everyone and help maybe those who might be intimidated on getting into reading but feel like they have to read a lot, because I know I've seen that within myself, that to maybe be or considered a reader or someone who reads, that you have to read a lot, like a chapter a day at the very least, that you have to do that. I don't think there's any reason you can't read just a couple chapters a day and to be considered a reader. So I've come up forth with a few points to maybe help those who might be intimidated on getting into reading, and maybe feel intimidated by those who do read those 5 books. We all know that one person, they read 5 books a week or whatever, or a book a day. I can't imagine doing that. I don't have the time to do it. I know many of you don't have the time to do it. So let's take a look at a couple points that I think might help you realize that to be a reader, you don't have to read a lot. So my first point is, what's the rush? Why do you feel like you have to read a lot to be a reader? Like, it's not a competition. Out of all the skills I have and all the skills you have and that you can think of, out of any of those, does reading make the most sense to compare yourself with others to try to compete? So what if you only read a couple chapters a day? You don't know other people's lifestyles, why they're able to read that much. They don't know your lifestyle. Maybe you're in college and all your reading time is textbooks. Maybe you're retired, and like you have time to read a ton of books. It is what it is. I mean, like, sometimes people just are so busy they can't read a lot. Sometimes people have a little more free time. Maybe they just have that ability to read a ton on the weekend. Who's to say? And secondly, and a little more in depth, not all books are created equal. I think this is a big reason why some people get, baffled. How are you able to read so much in such a short amount of time? Well, perhaps those people are reading books that are a little bit easier to read. That's not to say there are some people who blow through some very complex books. But let's take a look at some books that I have in my library. Let's remove Delibird there. I have not read all of these. I've read some of these. Some of these I'm currently reading. Let's take a look at a few books to examine, shall we, why all books are not created equal. So first here I have, and I've organized these to be a little bit from easiest to more difficult. So first we have a manga, Gintama. I got this recently. I've seen much of the anime, but a friend got this for me. I will pay you back. I have not forgotten. This is a manga, and if you look at the text inside, it's pictures and maybe a few sentences a page. Not a very long read. You could easily read this in like an hour, maybe less. And of course, you might choose to take your time. There's a lot of pictures in it that you might want to stick around and take your time and absorb it all. But that's all to say, like, this would not take long to read, like, at all. Like, you could read this so quickly. You could easily read 5 of these a week, maybe several a day. That's not to say if you blow through a bunch of these, you're not a reader. This is reading material. You're still reading when you go through this. It's definitely not a very dense read, but it's still a book, by some standard. What else do we got here? Let's see. All right. This is a bit of a throwback. I don't think I've opened this in about a while, well, at least over 10 years. This is a book from the Warriors series. I don't know if any of you else have read this. I really enjoyed this series as a kid, and you can tell the pages are very, I don't know if that's going to show up on the camera. They're just about orange, and like they started as white, then they went to yellow, now they're orange. Just because this book has been around for so long. But if you look in this book, the margins are, huge. It's double spaced. I have a book later on. I'll show you that Words go all the way from across each side of the page, and there's no double spacing like at all. And of course, this book is meant for, preteens and kids or maybe even teenagers. So all the phrases and words and dialogue are going to be very easy to digest, no matter what your reading level is. It's, a story, so it's going to be a lot easier to absorb that way. And with books like this that are in this, more narrative story format, they're going to be a lot easier to digest because when you read it, it's going to be a lot closer to the way you think. That's the one thing. Like, I have other books in here that when you read the dialogue, it's going to take a lot longer to read because it's not, the phrases aren't going to be like the kind of phrases you think in your head. Whereas something like this, or even Gintama, it's going to be a lot quicker to read it because it's a lot closer to how you think in your head. Moving on, this is a book I'm reading currently. This is Moonwalking with Einstein. I thoroughly enjoy this book. This is a fantastic book. I would highly recommend it. I'm a little under halfway. And this book, it's a little bit longer than both the books we saw, so it's going to take longer for that reason. It's about in between 200 and 300 pages. But this book, it's not going to take, it's not a super dense read because it's still kind of in a narrative format. This is about, actually, I should go ahead and mention, this is about a guy who was a journalist, and he spent some time going around with this guy who was a memory champion, and he, let's get my camera back into focus, there we go. Spent some time sort of picking this guy's brain who was a memory, quote unquote, went into these memory championships and competed, and they would learn how to do various types of memorization. We even go over memory palaces. We have how to memorize a poem, but it's in a narrative format, so it's going to be a lot quicker to read than some of these other books that I'll go over in a minute, where it's a lot more hard information. But nevertheless, it's about maybe somewhat of a more esoteric topic rather than the last two books we looked at. So you might come across some phrases you're not quite familiar with, or a word that's you don't read quite as much. And of course, the information is going to be a lot denser. There's a lot of it's not exactly a how-to book, but the some of the information you're going to come across, you might want to take a minute to digest before moving on to the next section or the next sentence. Nevertheless, it's a great read. You're going to be engaged, just because it's of the way it's written, but it's also not going to be a super easy read either. Moving on, what do we have next? Here we go. This is also a book I'm reading right now. This is The King in Yellow. This is a work of fiction. I don't read a lot of fiction, but I've been trying to get into more recently. But something like this is going to be a little bit more difficult because, you'll recall I mentioned earlier, this book, there we go. The dialogue wraps all from each side of the page there. That's a good example right there. And it goes all the way from top to bottom, side to side, and it's all very tightly packed, like they were trying to get as much text onto the page as they possibly could. And of course, this book, there's no date in this book, I don't think, but I believe this book was written in the late 1800s. So it's going to be, even if it was double spaced and you had larger margins, it's going to take a long time to read just because a lot of these phrases and words, I know there's many words I've read in here that I did not even know what they meant. I don't know if I can find any examples right off the bat, but just a lot of the phrases are going to be a lot more verbose, a lot more, intricate in how they're, spoken. You're not going to, a lot of the things you're going to come across in here, like I said, you're not going to be reading that, like, this is not going to be how you think. So it's going to take a lot longer time to process. But it's still a great read. I mean, it's definitely not something I think you could definitely get through it quickly. But I could see maybe, oftentimes I'll just read a page a night of this because there's so much just on one page that, it can be a lot to absorb, and you can still experience a lot just by, going through it one page at a time. Next, we have Hitchcock's Notebooks. I've skimmed through this a couple of times. I've never read it in full myself, but something like this, you'll see it's like, I think it's between, 500 and 600 pages. So right there, I mean, this could take you a long time to read, possibly more than a month, depending on how fast you read. But you look in here, and we have scripts. We have some, we have sketches. And something like this, it's going to be something you might want to, take some time. Like, there's a lot to absorb. I think that's from like The Birds, great film. If you come across that, you might want to take some time, like looking at all the artwork, and there's a lot of dialogue just course right there. It's the size of the book is pretty large just on its own, even aside from the huge page count. There's handwritten notes by Hitchcock himself. You might want to take some time just to, here's some more good examples. You might want to take some time just to look at those. Just take a few minutes, where rather than blow through page after page like you might in like the Warriors series or Moonwalking with Einstein. This could take you a good while to go through, just because you're going to want to take your time so you don't miss anything. And that's another point I'll go over is you may learn more by reading less. You might really want to read a page or two at a time, but we'll talk more about that in a minute. All right, second to last, The Confessions of St. Augustine. This I know me, like some people are more used to this style of reading, but for me, this would take a very long time to read because it's, let's see, Confessions, just reading the back here, Confessions of autobiographical work and so forth, written between 397 and 398 AD. So the words here, like in the dialogue, it's going to be much more archaic, obviously translated, of course, but even so, with that, this is unabridged. I've seen abridged versions of this, but this is unabridged, so it's going to be a lot more how it would have looked closer to how it would have looked originally translated into English. But if you try to read this, it could take you a very long time to read just one paragraph because the phrasing, a lot of the words are going to be totally foreign to you, possibly, and it might take you a lot. And of course, even the content itself, once you figure out what he's saying, it might take you a lot to actually digest it and understand it. So something like this, even though this book is only maybe not even 200 pages, looks like it's just under 200 pages, this could still take you a very long time to read just because of how dense it is and how complex, some of the phrases and paragraphs are. Lastly, Basic Electronics. Let's see. Copyright 1971. I don't know if I would recommend using this for a modern understanding of electronics, but I'm not sure where I have it in my library. I think I found this dumpster diving or maybe at a thrift store. But nevertheless, something like this, we have diagrams. Like, those are going to take a while to go through. I mean, if you're studying electronics, you're not going to want to, be breezing through this. And if, you're reading this and all your buddies are, on book 6 of that week or whatever, don't sweat it. I mean, like something like this is going to take this is worth 20 Gintamas right there. Like, I mean, this is going to take a while to go through to just understand it all. I mean, of course, if you're trying to get a full understanding and not, blow yourself up, I mean, you're going to want to take your time in something like this. And it covers a lot of material. I don't know what half these terms mean. We have oscillators, electric relays. Let's see. What else do we have? Radio broadcasting. It's a lot of material, even for just electronics. It's a comprehensive overview of a huge field. I'm sure it's not totally expansive on the topic, but in any case, it's going to take a long time to go through, and you're probably going to, we got some degrees there. You're probably going to want to run some numbers. I have not read this, I should clarify, but in any case, all these books, they're going to take different lengths of time to go through, so don't, feel intimidated if you're trying to read the Confessions of St. Augustine and, everyone else is reading 5 books a week. That's going to take much longer time to go through. Next, and like I mentioned earlier briefly, you may learn more by reading less. All of your friends or your family members, people who read those 5, 6, whatever books a week, they might be, but there's a good chance they might not be really absorbing all that material. Like if you're just opening up this and you're going, bit of an exaggerated example, but that is how some people read sometimes is they might just be skimming it. They might not be getting the full picture. And even if they do go through all those books in a week, they might not be really internalizing that information. Because especially if it's something like, electronics, you're going to want to internalize that. You're not going to want to read too much at a time just so you can make sure you're understanding it. I mean, really the same with any of these books. Fiction, rather, it's a lot easier to blaze through because it's narrative based usually, and you can internalize it a lot quicker because it's a lot closer to how you talk back and forth with someone. And lastly, this is a little bit of a closer, just kind of, last minute encouragement. If you're looking at getting into reading and you want to read more, but you're still kind of stuck at reading just a couple chapters a day. Reading faster will come with time. It's, again, I said it's not a competition. It's not like we're trying to read more than each other. But again, if you want to take in more material, that comes with time. I mean, like when I was a teenager, oh, my lighting went out here. There we go. All right. I forgot that I have my light here hooked into a timer because I have it set up so that in the morning it turns on and shines a bright light in my face to wake me up. But that was another little interesting hot tip for you all who have trouble getting out of bed, sort of impromptu based on the fact that I forgot it was hooked into a timer. But yeah, I would highly recommend doing that, putting a light into a timer so that it wakes you up in the morning. Anyway, so back on topic. You'll get faster reading with time. I mean, I know when I was a kid, a teenager, I used to read all the time. I read those Warriors books down there. I read those. I blazed through those. But then as I started, when I was an adult and I, started trying to read more, I was reading harder material, but it was also, I was just out of practice. Reading is a skill. It just takes time to get better, to get faster reading. And I'll probably do a video sometime on how to read faster because there's many, other than just doing it more, there's a lot of things you can actively do consciously. Just pick up your pace of reading. But that'll be a video at another time. Anyway, thank you all for watching. I hope this kind of helped. Maybe you're looking at getting into reading more, or just, people are speeding ahead of you, but just feel free to take your time. There's no rush. Not all books are created equal. Just keep on reading and just really enjoy it. Thanks.